Good morning, and thank you for braving the elements and transport difficulties, which I gather aren't that strange for Londoners, to come here and join us. As Marie said, this is a really special event for us. Whenever we have board meetings at 3IE, we often take the opportunity to have conferences, and we extend our board meeting to be an evidence week because we have some of the leading lights in evidence and evaluation as part of our board, and it's a real opportunity for our communities to engage with them. So I'm very happy that we're able to do this. But this is a particularly special year because, as Marie pointed out, it happens to be our 10th anniversary. Now, I was thinking to myself, what is so special about being 10? So for a human being, it's almost like the perfect age. Because I remember when I was 10, I have 4 kids. I remember when they were 10, that they were coherent after not being so at a younger age. They were delightful to converse with because they actually thought that an adult made sense. They were also quite innocent and perhaps a little naive because they were blissfully unaware that in a few years' time, there was a cliff edge called teenage years that might change things. So that's one reference point about feeling like what it's like to feel like 10. Now, for dogs, of course, it's quite different. Okay. It depends a little bit on size, apparently. But being 10 as a dog is like being anywhere from the late 50s to 66 years old, apparently, as a human being. Now, that's about the age that some of us, I know this for a fact, started to get letters from associations of retired persons asking them to join. Now, there's no association for retired canines, but what it means is that if we were a dog, we would be more senior. But of course, those aren't, 3IE is neither human nor canine, it's an institution. And when you think about institutions and how old they are, it's a much wider range. I looked up what is the oldest company in the world that still exists. And it may not surprise you to learn that it's a Japanese company called Komogumi, which apparently in 578 built temples and shrines. By the way, in case you're interested, the oldest UK company still existing, established in 1953, is, guess what? A pub called the Bingley Arms. But those are outliers. For the S&P group of companies, the average age is about 20. And it turns out for U.S. nonprofits, of which 3IE is one, it's 501c3, it's also the same. It's about 20 years is about the average age. So as an institution, we would feel middle-aged. But I also said, well, maybe reference points aren't that good because middle age is fine, but not exactly inspiring, perhaps. And I read some research that said, well, it doesn't really matter, perhaps, because people's perceived age is often different from their chronological age. And in fact, this might have positive effects on your health, because I don't know how you may do the mental math now about how old you think you are today. I know how old I think I am, and I won't reveal that to you. But it is different because I am approaching 10 years in dog years. So, and what I take away from this is that you're only as old as you feel. And I think that's the best thing that we can do today is to really feel great about 3IE because it doesn't really matter how old we are. We have accomplished a lot. Now, what I want to do in the next 5 minutes or so is share with you what some of those accomplishments are. I'm an East Asian, as it's obvious, by ancestry. And it's a little hard for me we're out of our comfort zone when we actually brag about our achievements. So I took the opportunity to poll several of our alums in 3IE, some of the leading experts, and the staff, and asking the question, what should we as a community in 3IE be proud of? And let me just mention 4 things. I want to share these with you because these are lessons not just for 3IE, but I think for the whole evidence and evaluation community. And these are the 4 things that they said. The first is that we as a community have really fulfilled the vision of the founding document that really established 3IE a dozen years ago. It was a document called When Will We Ever Learn? From the Center for Global Development, which basically said that after 65 or 70 years of development experience, number of lessons that we as a community has learned that was based on evidence in which the outcomes could be attributed to the interventions was very, very small. And this led a group of donors, and DFID is one of them as a founding donor, to establish 3IE. Since then, 3IE has been able to produce many more impact evaluations, at last count about 240 almost, and almost 50 systematic reviews, and things that we can really be proud of in terms of just sheer weight of evidence. But more than that, some of these evaluations have been in pretty difficult areas, such as humanitarian assistance, transparency in the governance of natural resources, and a number of other areas. A second reason that I think we can be proud of as an evaluation community is that we have been working very, very hard to ensure that not only are these studies published in the best academic journals, but that they're also, which is great, but they're also being taken up by decision makers who really affect the lives of poor people around the world. Now, not all of them are, and it's still a huge challenge for all of us, but we as a community have really taken this on board very, very seriously. In 3IE, we have tried to ensure that in all of the work that we do, we have engagement plans that really ensure that the research and the needs of decision makers coincide and are thus more useful. One example of this is, you'll see outside these evidence use briefs that 3IE produces. And this one is a study on using evidence to prevent violence against women in Uganda. And this was done just about the time that 3IE started. It happened to be done by Charlotte Watts as the principal investigator. I didn't pick this just because of that. But what this brief also shows is how this particular study, which really looked at how community activism kits for preventing violence against women had an effect on the attitudes of both men and women in that country, has led to piloting by the government in order to see whether they can actually scale up this program in the future. A third reason for us to be happy about being 10 is that we have established a community of practice of like-minded champions of evidence. And you're here as part of that, but in 3IE we actually formalized this in the form of our members. DFID is a founding member in this organization. And this network has spawned other activities because the people who belong to this network interact with each other under the auspices of organizations like 3IE, which has spawned other institutions within Africa, for example, such as Twende and Mbele, and the West Africa Capacity Building Initiative for Impact Evaluation. And the fourth and final reason is that we as a community have all contributed greatly to the enabling environment to generate and use evidence. 3IE has done this because it has innovated evidence gap maps, which present a visualization of what are the evidence gaps with respect to interventions and outcomes to any topic, have really taken off in terms of demand, because it helps funders, it helps policymakers realize that whether or not they're working in areas which there is a high density of good evidence or not. Another innovation is to ensure that we are at the cutting edge of making all the evidence available easily. In 3IE, we have a repository of over 5,000 impact evaluations and systematic reviews that have been published since the mid-'80s till just, I think, a couple of years ago. And we are working very hard to make sure that this is made publicly available and even more easily searchable than it is today. So those are just 4 reasons. There are many others. I'll stop there for now, why we should be happy at being 10 and the accomplishments that we have had. But of course, we also should be excited about being 10 because there are more challenges to take up over the next 10 years that we would be happy to. And my polling partners, of course, said that here are a few of the issues that we think you ought to be looking at to make sure that we are even more relevant and useful for development. Let me just mention 3 in no particular order. The first challenge is how can we make sure that rigorous evidence can be more cost-effective and timely? There's always been a storyline in which a lot of organizations have said, look, it's better to have any kind of evidence even if it's done in a few weeks, because as long as it's available. Because the kind of hard evidence that you may have will take years, on average about 2 to 3, and a lot of money. The median for 3IE is about $350,000 to $400,000 US dollars to actually produce results. We in 3IE, along with others, have been making great attempts to try to address the cost and timeliness issue. Technology may help, using big data, for example, for evaluations, or machine learning for systematic reviews are just some of the things that we're working on. But this is going to actually keep us energized for the next few years. A second challenge is how to continue building capacity at the country level. We're very proud in 3IE that some of the best researchers in the world have actually availed of the support that 3IE has been able to provide to them. But we're even prouder of the fact that a lot of the evaluations have actually been done by researchers in developing countries themselves. Now, there's still a relatively small number, but it is growing. And one of the things that we have to do, or we're told that we should do in the future, is to ensure that that trend continues upward. The third and final challenge is to continue to be a loud and insistent voice for the call for evidence in decision-making in developing countries, especially in these troubled times of false news and what have you. This is going to lead to better policymaking, we believe. But as Ruth Levine, whom I'll introduce shortly, points out, it's not only good for policymaking, it's also a moral imperative for us as human beings. Because the search for truth is fundamental to us as a species, and evidence is going to be critical in that endeavor. So, those are just some of the things we're proud of, some of the things that are going to keep us occupied over the next few years. And what we hope in the next day and a half is that we will go through the both celebrate the lessons that we've learned but also to talk about how we will continue addressing those challenges that are going to keep us awake for the next little while. And that's what the agenda is all about. So the agenda, very quickly, is that after this, when I finally shut up, there'll be a keynote discussion, which I'll introduce very shortly. But the first day are a series of sessions that bring together the different stakeholders that embody 3IE, the evidence generators, the evidence users, okay, and the evidence funders, for really what I hope will be interesting debates on championing evidence use and evaluation in Africa, social protection research, and making an impact on the learning crisis. At the end of today, there will be our annual Howard White Lecture. We're very proud that Gonzalo Hernandez Licona, the head of Coneval, head of evaluation for the country of Mexico, will be joining us for that. Tomorrow, it's really looking ahead at some of the innovations that 3IE and others have been working on in access and measurement, on evidence and open access to data. So this is a combination, as I said, of celebrating and learning, looking back, and discussing what we're going to be doing looking forward. In short, it is all about learning, but let's not forget, this is a party for a 10-year-old. I also hope that it'll be an opportunity to have fun. Thank you very much.